What's up, folks? How's it going? It's Haussmann here with another Throwback Thursday video. This should be the last one, then I'll be on track to be making new stuff again. Just had a nice little break. It was all good. This video is basically the early evolution of Moon Knight. This is something I was doing, this is 2021, something like that. You've seen them. And it's like, oh, the whole time I was kind of doing the same thing that I've been doing, but way better with the editing. Oh my gosh. This is actually hard to watch, but I'm sure you guys can enjoy it. Old bald Hossie talking about stuff with bad editing, but all the details are still there. Like, I cover a lot of ground. Anyway, it's Moon Knight, so enjoy it, and bye. So who is Moon Knight? There's two very simple answers that usually get given. The first answer is, well, he's Marvel's Batman. And that's not entirely accurate. It's not entirely inaccurate, but it's not accurate either. The other answer is, oh, he's that superhero guy that's kind of washed up and crazy. And sometimes that's accurate too, but sometimes it's not. What Moon Knight is, I believe he's his own standalone character. There's nothing else quite like him anywhere in Marvel or DC, and he's one of my favorites, and we're gonna look into that. Currently, at the time of recording, Moon Knight has made 446 comic appearances, and I'm going to read every single one of them. Yeah, that'll be fun. I'm going to see how his character changed and developed since his debut in 1975. And of course, I'm going to let you guys in on the ride. So this is part one of a several-part series on the complete history of Moon Knight. Back on May 27th, 1975, Doug Moench and Don Perlin were on Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night is its own thing, and they created Moon Knight as an antagonist to Werewolf by Night. And I just got to read like the opening tag here. The tag's Russell, with a Jack in front of it. The kind of name that's fit for a normal 19-year-old dude living out of LA. Not the kind of name you'd expect to find slapped on a guy who sprouted fangs, paw-to-paw fur, and wolfish howls every time the moon ballooned full. Unless that guy happened to have a father who was cursed by an arcane book called the Darkhold, who inherited his father's curse on his 18th birthday. Stan Lee presents Werewolf by Night. That instantly makes me want to read everything Werewolf by Night. Maybe in the future I'll get to that. Werewolf by Night. But here, actually, was where Moon Knight first appeared. And it starts off in the middle of a fight, Moon Knight just kicking the crap out of I guess, a previously injured Werewolf by Night. Mark Spector is the man that will go on to become Moon Knight. He was hired by the committee for his skills that they run down here. Soldier of fortune, a mercenary, veteran of 3 African wars, 5 South American revolutions, brief flirtation with the CIA, a weapons expert, versatile practitioner of virtually all the martial arts, an ex-prize fighter, Marine commando for 8 years prior to beating a lieutenant within an inch of his life, etc. So that's Mark Spector. Basically, he's a mercenary. He was hired by the committee to take out Werewolf by Night for them, to bring him in. And they gave him this costume, the Moon Knight costume, and they gave him a bunch of silver weapons because werewolves are immune to silver. And Moon Knight goes, and he's like, yeah, okay, and he takes the job. And even right here in his very first appearance, he's got a buddy flying a helicopter for him. That's Frenchie. Frenchie and the helicopter would be a mainstay for Moon Knight, like, for his entire career. So over 2 issues, he beats up the werewolf, and he brings him in and has him locked in a cage, and the committee's like, okay, we're gonna take care of this guy now. And I can't remember, they're doing some ritual or something. And Moon Knight's like, well, you paid me to bring him in. You didn't pay me to keep him here. And then the moon comes out and he starts turning into a werewolf. And they kick open the cage. And Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight beat the crap out of the committee together. And Moon Knight goes off. And he's like, oh, maybe I'm not a bad guy. Maybe I am. I don't know. Moon Knight appears a little while later in Werewolf by Night again. But it's just like a Werewolf by Night is hallucinating a bunch of his former adversaries. So it's not actually Moon Knight. So it doesn't really count. But he was there, briefly. Roughly a year later, in the spring of 1976, Doug Moench and Don Perlin were together again on Marvel Spotlight, where they got 2 issues that they got to dedicate to Moon Knight, and they really helped to flush the character out a bit more here. Ultimately took on this weird guy called the Conquer Lord. He was basically just fighting crime, much like Batman. But here they developed a lot more of his character. He was actually... You rarely see him as Mark Spector. He was Moon Knight most of the time, and then when he wasn't being Moon Knight, he would... Frenchie would fly his helicopter up to the mansion, and Moon Knight would jump out into a fountain on the rooftop and then swim under a passageway and come up into this bathtub in his bedroom as Stephen Grant. And Stephen Grant was Bruce Wayne, I guess. Stephen Grant is this rich socialite because Moon Knight knows that like a lot of these crime bosses and dirty deals and stuff are made at these fancy parties. So Moon Knight can't go to the fancy parties. I guess Mark Spector couldn't either, so he took a lot of the fortune he made as Mark Spector mercenary and created the persona of Stephen Grant. And Stephen Grant has a girlfriend, Marlene. Now, she knows everything that's going on, so it's not like, oh, a whole secret identity from her. She's the girlfriend of this rich socialite, and she's kind of meant to be the eye candy while he goes to these parties to not draw attention. It is a legitimate relationship, but she is only in a relationship with Stephen Grant. She's not in a relationship with Moon Knight, though she does help him. She's certainly not in a relationship with Mark Spector, as she calls him Stephen all the time. She never calls him Mark. She doesn't know about his other personality because she always gets disappointed when she shows up. It's like, oh, Stephen, are you taking me to a party tonight? And he's like, no, because he has another personality. Because as some of these deals are done at the big fancy parties where Stephen Grant can go, a lot of the other stuff is street level, underground. Puts on an old cap and messes up his hair and dresses down a bit and takes on the name Jake Lockley, where he goes and drives a taxi. And as Jake Lockley, he's got a couple of informants that aren't really informants. He goes to one diner where the waitress Gina hears a lot of things, and then there's also this, I believe, homeless guy. They don't necessarily, down on his luck, homeless-ish person named Crawley, and they're both introduced in this issue, and they are mainstays of the series as well. And that's where he gets a lot of his lower-level information. And the other, like, Jake Lockley has a job as a cab driver, and his boss is like, you can't just come and go whenever you please, like, you got to make me money. So, I mean, I guess even when he's not particularly looking for information on a case, he is off driving a cab, like, and that is something that would really define the character going forward. Like, he's got these different characters he plays. That's all they are right now, are characters. They aren't personalities, but I guess when people talk about Moon Knight being the crazy superhero, it's because down the road, and we will get to it. We won't get to it in this episode, but down the road, he does crack and he loses touch on which personalities are which, and which one's the real him. And as I said, like, in these first, all these issues we're covering, we don't ever really see him as Mark Spector. Much. We do a bit. So as I said, Marvel Spotlight nothing really special with the story, but it did a lot to establish who Moon Knight was, who Frenchie was, who Steve Grant was, who Jake Lockley was, who Mark Spector was, who Marlene was. Is it really built up his supporting cast and showed a lot that he's got these different identities that he uses. On top of that, he just fought the Conquered Lord, who I don't even know if ever came back, but there was like alligator pits and giant chess pieces, just standard 1970s Marvel fare. It was fun. It was a great read. I highly recommend it, just for building up who Moon Knight is. After that, it was about another year before Moon Knight showed up again, and he showed up in The Defender. In about 5 issues that were written by John Warner, David Kraft, Roger Silver. Not exactly sure who wrote it. They were kind of all over the place. This David Kraft actually wrote it and did the colors, which is really neat. You don't see that a lot. He did colors in some of the issues. It's really nothing. Doesn't do anything to build Moon Knight's character. He just kind of is there the entire time. He comes along and he's trying to save this guy. And there's Nick Fury's involved and there's a whole thing. And then he gets tied up with the Defenders, who then go to fight the Avengers and then go off and fight the Zodiac. Nothing, like I said, nothing really of note happens. Over 5 issues, Moon Knight is just kind of there. He does some neat stuff. He goes toe-to-toe with the Hulk for a minute. At one point he does say, I'm kind of a lone wolf, but if I was going to join a team, it'd probably be a team like this. And then he didn't. So that's good. And that was really just 5 issues with Moon Knight in them. Kept him relevant, I guess. Didn't really build his character. Didn't do anything to make his popularity soar, but it just got more eyes on the character, which was always good. And then the summer of 1978 would get what I call his first big team-up. Being in issues with the Defenders and the Avengers was something, but no, his first big team-up came with Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, in issues 22 and 23 of that series. So these Spidey issues were written by Bill Mantlo with art by Mike Zeck, and they were actually pretty good. It goes like most team-ups do. They have a little confusion, and Spider-Man and Moon Knight fight, and then they're like, wait, we're both good guys, so hey, let's go be good guys and go get the bad guy. So yeah, this one again features Jake Lockley. He comes across a situation where he knows this guy's got information on the Magia, so he turns into Moon Knight, and he's going and shaking the guy down for information, and Spider-Man's like, stop it, and he starts taking him on, and Moon Knight's like, no, get out of here, and I'm fighting back, and then Spider-Man's like, oh god, why are we fighting? And Spider-Man even thinks to himself, he's like, I'm fighting Moon Knight. Like, Moon Knight's supposed to be a good guy. Why am I doing this? And Moon Knight's just like, this dick attacked me, so I'm fighting him back. So they have a little fight, and then they're interrupted by the Cyclone. They get blown away by the Cyclone. He's a villain. Cyclone wipes the floor with Moon Knight and Spider-Man, and then afterwards they get up, they get together, and Moon Knight's like, you know we're on the same side, Spider-Man. Like, don't fight me. And then the team-up begins. Frenchie in the helicopter takes them up to the mansion, and Moon Knight dives down into his fountain and up into his bedroom. He's like, Marlene, we're going to have some company, so get out of here. Spider-Man shows up, and they go down to his moon cave. It's not really a moon cave, but I mean, he's got a giant moon computer. Once again, he doesn't have a moon computer, I'm just calling it that. He's got a big computer with all the crime on it, and it's very Batman-y. What I really like here is, like, they're not buddy-buddy. Like, Moon Knight's not just like, hey, pal, come on in and share everything. Moon Knight's like, no, I know we gotta go here, because this is where I keep my information. And Spider-Man's like, well, that's a big computer. You must be rich. And Moon Knight's like, get out of my business, all right? You know, like, I got my secrets. Just stay out of them, or I'll start prying into yours. I mean, they are allies, but they're not like best friends. It's actually It's really good. I really like the characterization. And even still, this shows that Moon Knight isn't perfect. He's got this big map of the Magia, and he's got like Hammerhead and Silvermane and Kingpin, and Spider-Man's thinking to himself. And also, Spider-Man's not offering this information up. Spider-Man's just like, Silvermane's in the hospital and Kingpin's dead. Like, maybe this Moon Knight doesn't know what he's doing. And then they go and they beat up the bad guys and they stop Cyclone. Was there ever a doubt? They team up, they work really well, and they're like, hey, they gain a mutual respect for each other, and they go on. More importantly, this appearance in Spider-Man was, once again, a little bit of a boost, showing that Moon Knight is out there, because it rolled right into his appearances in the B stories of the Hulk magazine that started the next month, with Doug Moench back. So Hulk magazine was Rampaging Hulk. It was renamed at issue 10 to be Hulk magazine, and with that actually it also got color. It was just a bigger, shinier magazine-style comic book. Hulk magazine was playing off the popularity of the Hulk TV series, so there's an editorial diction for more human interest-driven stories with no supporting cast, no guest stars, and no supervillains, like kind of just keeping it like what the Hulk show was. I don't know if that came across to the Moon Knight backup stories as well, but it did. I don't know if that was supposed to, but there were no team-ups, there were no supervillains, anything like that. It was a more human-driven story with the Moon Knight, which I think is good and bad. I enjoy getting more about Moon Knight's character, but like when he's teaming up with Spider-Man, fighting supervillains, like that is where I think Moon Knight shines, absolutely. He's a colorful character. He deserves to be in this Marvel world with all these other colorful characters. Again, written by Doug Moench, with some of the art by Gene Colan and Tony Dezuniga. And it's really good. There's good stuff, but with issue 13, Bill Sienkiewicz became the artist. That's when the final piece clicked into place for Moon Knight. This art is astounding. This is some of the best Moon Knight stuff I've seen, and Bill Sienkiewicz would go on to be one of the main Moon Knight artists for years to come. Other artists had done it before, like where Moon Knight's cape is the shape of a moon. I read back everything and I saw it, and I just didn't really notice it. It doesn't stand out, but as soon as Bill Sienkiewicz starts doing it, it's like, wow. You really notice it. Like, Sienkiewicz didn't invent the idea, but he absolutely perfected it. That said, these Hulk backup stories are nothing special. They do, once again, they just do more to develop Jake Lockley and Stephen Grant, the personas, and establish what Moon Knight is, but he's basically off just fighting normal guys. They do reference that he does have some superpowers that are connected to the moon. They don't really say what that is, so you can kind of just assume it's heightened strength, heightened agility, things like that. More than Batman has. And there's one really good story. It's just a standalone story where he is out at someone's house to observe the lunar eclipse. And he goes out in the woods, and there's 3 guys trying to break into the house, so Moon Knight goes out and he stops them, but there's also something else that kicks the crap out of him in one punch, and you don't really know what's happening. And then in the Hulk story, I believe from the same issue, you get the other side of that story, and Hulk is out in the woods, and these 3 guys are there, and he kind of just beats the crap out of Moon Knight in one panel. Like, it's okay, it's not that good. Retelling it back is actually not that good. It's interesting how we get to see the story from both sides, but it's ultimately a nothing story. It's Moon Knight in the woods. He beats up one guy, Hulk beats up 2, Hulk punches him. In his issue, you never realize it's the Hulk, and in Hulk's issue, you never realize it's Moon Knight, so you can read them independently and not know. It seemed cool while I was reading it. Saying it back doesn't sound cool at all. Forget it. Ignore it. Forget I said anything. Jeez. But in the middle of these magazine issues, the magazine was coming out every 2 months, and in the middle of that, in the summer of 1979, Moon Knight got to team up with The Thing in Marvel 2-in-1 number 52, which is actually the first appearance of the villain Crossfire. Marvel 2-in-1 was basically Thing team-up at this point in time, so he teamed up with The Thing. So Moon Knight teamed up with The Thing in an issue written by Stephen Grant. That's awesome. With art by Jim Craig and P. Marcos. The issue starts with the Thing fighting some bad guys, and Moon Knight shows up to help him, and the Thing is like, who needs you? Get out of here. Nobody wants your help. He's like, oh, come on, I'm Moon Knight, I'm helping. And he's like, no, get out of here. And they save the day, and the cops show up, and Moon Knight takes off, and Thing is like, ah, whatever, that guy sucks. They don't need him. And yeah, and then afterwards, the Thing's got to go track down some leads. He's having trouble finding a ride, and up pulls a cab. So he's like, oh, sweet, I found a cab. And he hops in, and it's Jake Lockley, and Jake Lockley drives him to the site, and then Thing goes inside to fight some more bad guys, and all of a sudden Moon Knight shows up again. He's like, well, how'd you follow me here? What the heck? And they beat up some more bad guys, then they come across Crossfire, and Moon Knight in his head is like, man, I know that guy. And it's turns out to be this guy he knew back in his CIA days. Nothing really comes of it, but it's just interesting that they're shedding a bit more light on Moon Knight's past. Yeah, and the whole thing has like a playful back and forth where the Thing is kind of like, I made a rock and these guys are shooting guns, like, I don't need your help. And Moon Knight's like, no, I'm helping. We're buddies, it's good. Eventually, he does gain the respect of the Thing. They defeat all the bad guys, they go, and the Thing's like, man, I'm gonna have a hard time catching a cab on the way home. And Moon Knight's like, I don't think it'll be so hard. Just a fun issue, once again, putting Moon Knight right in the center of the Marvel Universe of all these colorful characters, like Moon Knight is one of them. Interestingly enough, as I said, it was written by Stephen Grant, and Stephen Grant is the only Moon Knight persona not to come out in that issue. Interesting. So after that, there were a few more Hulk issues in 15, 17, 18, and 20, and pretty much one every 4 months we're getting a Moon Knight appearance. One of them is actually a really good story. This maniac goes and buys a mask and a hatchet, and he's kind of just, they call him like the Hatchet Man, and he's just killing nurses, and he's killed 8 or 9 already, and Marlene's like, well, if you're going to fight this guy and investigate this, then I'm coming too. And Moon Knight's like, I really don't want you to, and she's like, no, but I'm doing it, so whatever. And she goes and gets a nurse costume and goes out, and Moon Knight is having like these flashbacks because he knows this guy. Like, this guy is out specifically looking for him. He's killing these nurses to send a message to him. More, not to Moon Knight, to Mark Spector. Then he goes out and Marlene gets shot. This guy grabs her. Moon Knight wasn't there quick enough. The police shoot at the guy and end up shooting Marlene. Moon Knight's like, well, that sucks. And he kind of knocks the cops back. And this hatchet man ends up sticking his hatchet right in Marlene's back. And it does not look good. And Moon Knight yells at the police. He's like, you get her to the hospital. And they're like, we're not listening to you. He's like, get her to the goddamn hospital. And they're like, okay, fine. And they get her to the hospital. And Moon Knight goes and he's like, I am Mark Spector. Come get me, Randall Spector. Like, and it's like, whoa, what? So this Hatchet guy is Moon Knight's brother. And then more flashbacks to when they were kids and stuff. And it's like this whole thing. And he's like, you have snapped. You are crazy. I gotta take you out. And he doesn't want to fight him, but he does. And it ends up, he ends up dying. Not Moon Knight. Randall Spector dies. He comes at Moon Knight. Moon Knight doesn't want to fight him, so Moon Knight ducks out of the way. He trips, falls off the roof, and lands and impales himself on a tree. And that was neat. It was, like I said, a really good issue. Then the next story after that is a pretty good one as well. Marlene is dying in the hospital, and the nurse is like, it's touch and go. We don't know. We will know by morning if she's going to make it or not. And that just kind of shows us Moon Knight's night. And he deals with a lot of darkness in New York. Just some petty crime, stuff like that. He stops it, but then there's also people using drugs, and he's like, oh. He finds a kid that overdoses, and he's like, that kid's not going to learn a lesson. He's going to get back on drugs. He finds a homeless guy begging for money. He gives him some money. It was like, that guy's just going to go get drunk. He'll be drunk in 10 minutes instead of finding a nice warm place to sleep. There's a pimp that's like pushing around his hooker, and Moon Knight's like, hey, knock it off. And the hooker turns around and is like, get the hell out of my business. The Moon Knight's like, oh, this city sucks, man. And then he goes back to the hospital as the sun starts coming up and learns that Marlene is going to be okay. So like I said, there was some really good character stuff happening in those Hulk issues. And then there was Marvel Preview number 21. Again, Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz. They got together and wrote this story. Once again, just a basic Moon Knight story. Nothing too extravagant, no guest stars, nothing special. It was in black and white. It was reprinted in color later. But it was Marvel Preview. It was just another magazine still. And that one kind of was to whet the appetite, saying, look, these guys are coming, because later this year there's a Moon Knight ongoing series by Moench and Sienkiewicz. So I'm not sure if the Marvel Preview 21 was a trial for the creative team to see if they could pull off another Moon Knight story, even though they've been doing it the whole time. I think it was more of a coming out to the world saying, listen, here's Moon Knight. There's going to be a Moon Knight ongoing series by these two. Get ready for it. But before Moon Knight's ongoing series, he would appear one more time in Captain America number 245. And this one's kind of interesting because Moon Knight doesn't actually appear. Captain America goes to a diner, and he's sitting in a diner, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, Captain America's in this diner. And in the background, this guy is like, whoa, I'm hungry. Captain America's like, oh, how's it going? I'll have a piece of American apple pie. And everybody's like, oh, Captain America, this is great. And you just see the whole time this guy in the background's like, what, am I invisible? Do I not exist? I just wanted coffee. Like, does this place even serve food? And he's getting cranky, and then Captain America's like, hey, this guy's my friend here. Serve this guy something too. And he's like, okay, I'll have a piece of pie if it's good enough for Captain America. And I know what you're thinking, like, what does this have to do with anything? Well, eventually Captain America finishes up and goes outside, and everybody's still like, I can't believe Captain America ate at my diner, wow. And then the guy that was all surly inside is sitting by a cab, and he's like, hey, Captain America, my friend, do you need a ride? And Captain America's like, yeah, can you take me to Brooklyn or whatever? He's like, okay, I sure can. By the way, my name's Jake Lockley. And this is like in the first 4 pages of the issue. So then I read the rest of the issue, and Moon Knight does not show up. Steve Grant doesn't show up. Mark Spector doesn't show up. Jake Lockley does not show up again. I don't know what to tell you. And it's not just a coincidence that there's some guy named Jake Lockley driving a cab. Like, he looks just like they draw Jake Lockley in the Moon Knight comics. So I don't know if editorial was like, we got a Moon Knight comic coming soon. Everybody's got to get this Moon Knight character in there. And Roger McKenzie, the writer, was just like, oh, I'll find a way to sneak him in there without doing it. Or maybe Roger McKenzie was just like, I'm a fan of this. Like, I would love to know the story behind it because it's really interesting. And then after that, August 19th, 1980, Moon Knight debuted in his own series that will go for 38 issues, which we'll be covering next time. So if you like this video, leave it a like. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you can catch the next one when it comes out. I plan on going through all 446 appearances of Moon Knight, and if it's not too giant by the end. Maybe I'll splice it all together into one big video to just have the complete history of Moon Knight. Before I get too lost into the rambling at the end of the video that I always do, if you've noticed the music playing underneath this whole time, it's actually by the Clerics of Ohm, Music for Your Inner Geek. You can find them on YouTube. I'll put a link up here somewhere. They have a whole bunch of music and stuff and other videos. This is actually a Moon Knight theme song that they did that I asked for permission to use and they graciously allowed me to. So I highly suggest you check them out, subscribe to them, and watch a bunch of their videos and listen to their stuff because it is amazing and hopefully you get to hear more of it here in the future. My cat meowed. Anyway, I've been Haussmann17. Like I said, like, subscribe, share this around, do all the stuff, comment. Jake Lockley, Stephen Grant, Moon Knight.